Happy Sunday morning to you all. All the kids are sad and depressed, and all the parents are happy because school's starting, right? All the parents want the schedule, all the kids want, vacation forever. I love being here with you guys. I hope that you're excited to be here. There's nothing that can be better than spending the day with our church family, worshiping the one and only true God. And I love being here because nothing's better than family. And so we get to spend that day together. And last week we, hopefully you didn't miss, but we kicked off our series, People and Promises. And what we're doing is we're walking through the book of Daniel. And did y'all enjoy last week? It's pretty good. All right, we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to dive through it, break it down a little bit. So last week, if you weren't here, we basically went through the first two chapters of the book of Daniel. And what we really, if I were to sum it up really, really quickly, it would basically say that God is in control. That is our hope for life, is that God is in control of all things. Matter of fact, the way that they described it, Daniel did a wonderful, wonderful prayer. And in that prayer, basically, he starts to break down how God's in control. And the first thing that he says is that God is the one that directs and shapes the world. He is the one that is in control of everything. So as things happen, and as things happen in our life, and as we go to the left, and as we go, it's God that is shaping the direction of the world, meaning that if good things happen in the world, God shaped it that way. If bad things, God shaped it that way. Why? Because he is in control. Matter of fact, he goes on to say that he is the one that establishes kings and brings down kings, and establishes governments and brings down governments. And so if anybody is in power, if anybody is in a government, if anybody has a position, it's because God has placed them there. He is in control of the world. And lastly, we found out that he is the one and only true God. And the way that we found that out was through a dream that he gave to King Nebuchadnezzar. And basically this dream drove him crazy. So crazy that he gathers all the wise men, he brings them all into the room, and he basically says, I need you to tell me not only what the dream is, but I want you to interpret it to me so that I know you're not just messing with me, that you really know what's happening. And all these guys basically come to the same assumption. There is no human on earth that can do what you're asking us to do. There is none. And even Daniel agrees with him and says, hey, no one on earth, no human is capable of telling you what your dream is and interpreting it. But there is one, and his name is Jesus. And that one and only God can do these things. And we get there, and Nebuchadnezzar understands by the interpretation of it that his God, that Daniel's God, is the God that he's been looking for. Now, I may have read this last week. I can't remember, but I want to read to you just to understand where we left off. This is Daniel 2:47. This is the response of the king after Daniel interprets everything that's going to happen. And he says, the king answered and said, Daniel, truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings and the revealer of mysteries. For you have been able to reveal this mystery to me. And right when that happens, we get all warm and fuzzy inside because we know what's about to happen. We know that Daniel has done the thing that we've all wanted him to do, and he's explained to Nebuchadnezzar who God is, and he introduced him to him, and all the wise men understand that none of them could do what God could do. And Nebuchadnezzar is got to be a believer now because he's witnessed the power and the wisdom and the guidance of God. And then we flip the page to chapter 3, and the first thing he does is create an image. And that's the first thing he does is go, you know what, I just found out that this is the God, and now I'm going to create an image of a different God. And so what we have to understand is Nebuchadnezzar does believe in Daniel's God, but he doesn't believe that he's the one and only God. See, what he's making in that statement is he's saying, yeah, he is the God of gods. So while I have all these gods, he's just the highest one. He never gives up his other gods. And that's what the problem is he wants to believe in several gods. And so he says, hey, yeah, you're the God of God. You may be the King of Lords and all these things, but that doesn't mean that you're the only one to me. You're just the highest one of all the ones that I have. He hasn't quit the other gods, and that means he hasn't quite gotten the lesson that God is trying to teach him. Here's the good news for us all. God doesn't give up on us when we don't quite get the lesson. There are times in life that God is trying to teach us something, show us something, reveal something to us, and we don't always pass the test. But our God doesn't give up on us, and he hasn't given up on this world, and he hasn't given up on his creation. He will win in the end. That's the God that I serve. So that's where we're going to pick up in this chapter 3, and we're going to go through this really quickly. Hopefully, did everybody do their homework? Oh, if you weren't here, you didn't even know you had homework, all right? You were supposed to read chapter 3. Just so you're aware, we're going to read chapter 4 and 5 next week. But we'll go through it pretty quickly. All the verses will be up on the screen. Verse 1, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and the width was 6 cubits. And he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Okay, so just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, there's a couple theories of what he's done. One theory is that what we're reading in chapter 3 was instant after chapter 2. And basically, he had this dream, he saw this image, and when we flipped the page, that was the next thing that he did, was to develop this image of what he saw in the dream, because it was so beautiful and so powerful, and it messed with his mind so much. He goes, I need to take this and I need to share it with everybody. And they believe that it was just an instant thing. Now, the reason that they believe this is because of the link of the dream, and they're going, he made an image of the dream. Now, there's some other ones that believe that the reason that it was of gold, the reason that the whole statue was laid in gold. Now, understand, this statue is massive, right? We'll get to the size in a second. It is not solid gold, okay? It's overlaid in gold, which was a very big custom of that time, especially in temples. Like when they did the temple of God, they would overlay a lot of things in gold. And so it was overlaid, and the reason why they believe he overlaid this whole statue in gold was because in the dream and in the image that he saw in his dream, he was the head. And if you remember, the head of that statue was of gold. And so in this, he creates this image of the dream, but he covers the whole thing in gold, as to say, my kingdom will never end. Like, I'm not going to have the clay and the iron and the bronze. No one's taken over. It's me, and it's me forever. And now he's creating this kind of image of who he is and setting himself above the rest, saying, no, I will be as long as I want to be. Now, the biggest difference is some people believe that because he couldn't totally recall the image, that it may not be exactly human likeness, but it might have been more of an abstract statue of an image of a person, because he couldn't totally recall everything. So there's some people that think it was the exact image, and some people think it was an abstract image. Either way is fine. What you need to understand is that this thing was 90 feet high. I mean, 90 feet high. This is a massive statue, and it's 9 feet wide. So it's huge. It's not something when you're traveling, you just go, oh, I didn't see that. This thing is massive. As a matter of fact, even today, if you have an archaeological Bible, it's awesome, right? You can go through and find everything that they have found today through archaeology that proves the Bible true. And so one of the things that they have found in this valley of Durham, where this is located, is they have found a base that a statue once stood on. And this is not some like little bitty base, okay? This base is 29 feet high, and it's 46 by 46. It's massive. And then a 90-foot statue was on top of this. And so they believe that this was where that statue was that King Nebuchadnezzar built. Now, the Valley of Dura means an enclosed wall or temple area. So where he has placed this is basically a place of worship that all of Babylon could go and visit and basically spend their religious time worshiping the gods. And so that's where it's been placed. And so we go on to verse 2. Then Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justice, the magistrates, and all the officials of the province to come to the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justice, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication in the image of Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. If you're looking at me, I understand that this is very repetitive. If you don't know, the reason why it's so repetitive was that was the style of writing, because they didn't have computers and they didn't have paper like we have paper. So they made things repetitive so it was easy to remember and then pass on. Because a lot of the stuff during this time was passed on verbally, and so it's repetitive. This is like the situation where your boss calls for a meeting and you go, that should have been an email. Okay, we get it, right? It's annoying. I'm sorry I'm going to have to read these things over and over again, but that's the way Scripture is. Now, people gathering there are public officials. Why are there so many different types of officials that are gathering here? Well, what he's been doing is he's been growing his kingdom, and he's been overtaking different nations and countries and beliefs and systems and governments. And as he's been gathering those together, he's been keeping different titles and officials from different places that he's overtaken to help try to unify. And so what do you do when you take over a nation? You don't just destroy everything. No, you capture them, you bring them in, and you connect them to what you're building. And that's what we see here, is we see all these different types of government and positions that come from all different areas that he has brought together into one unified, basically, empire that he's building. And so the satraps are the princes. So you don't just throw away all the princes. No, you gather them up and you say, hey, I'm going to give you a role within my government. And so those are the princes. The prefects are the military commanders. So that's your top generals of the army. And so those people are important. Then you have governors, which are the civic leaders. They would work in the communities to find out what the needs are and then bring them back to the kings. You have counselors, who were the keepers and the interpreters of the law. You have the magistrates, who were the sheriffs. They were the enforcers of the law. You have the treasurers, which that one is obvious. They kept the money, right? They understood, hey, we're going to build this. Okay, it's going to cost this much. Do we have the finance to back that? That's what the treasurers did. And then they defined the last one as the lesser officials. They don't even give them a title. They're just the other people, right? You're just some part of the government, but you don't really have a title. Nobody wants to be that guy, okay? And so all these people, they come and they gather them together. Why are they trying to gather them together? Well, when you overtake nations and governments and all this different stuff, and you bring it together, the biggest fear that you have is one thing: the rebellion. You don't want them to rebel and split apart everything that you've been building. So he's gathering everyone together to unite his kingdom through this dedication of this image. And the method that he's choosing to use is religion. Now, if you look back through history, he's not the only one to have this kind of mindset. A lot of people have tried to unite governments through religion and having a religious push to do that. And so some of them have been for good causes, but also some of them have been for bad. And so he's saying, hey, you know what? We need to come together and be one. The way we're going to do this is through worship and worship of this God that I've created. Now, this dedication is a test, because you have brought all these officials in. You said, hey, I'm going to give you roles and you're going to have power, but I need a test to know that you are going to be dedicated to me. I need to know that you're in allegiance to me. And so this is what happens in verse 4, is as the herald proclaimed aloud, you are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship to the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall not just go to trial, not talk about it, it will immediately be cast into the burning fire, right? And so he's basically saying, I'm creating this rule, and you're rather with me or you're dead. There's no against me. Because if you allow any sort of rebellion, any sort of separation in there, you're opening the door for somebody to dethrone you. And he's saying, that's not going to happen in my kingdom. So I'm going to create an image, and I'm going to have everybody bow down and worship to it. And if you don't worship to it, you're in trouble. And so we see all these instruments that they name, and the translators really actually don't have any idea what these instruments are. They just kind of connected it to things that we could understand. Some of them are strings, some of them are wind, some of them are percussion. But what we need to gather from that is there was the full orchestra. Instruments from all over the different places. A big band was there. And when we talk about when they play, it's not just some randomness. They weren't like on the Titanic where they're just playing, dinner music. What's happening at this moment is he's saying, hey, when we all gather together, we're going to have a dedication, and we're basically going to play the Babylonian national anthem. And when this anthem plays, you better bow down and worship to show your allegiance to me. And that's what's happening. Just as when we go to a ball game, right? They bring out the American flag, they play the national, we all stand in honor to our nation. That's what he's asking them to do here. And if you don't do it, it was very clear that means that you're a traitor. That you're going to come after me. If you're not willing to bow at the national anthem and this image and worship and unite together under me, then I have to take you out. And so this is kind of the test that he's put out there. Verse 7, therefore, as soon as the people heard the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that the king Nebuchadnezzar has set up. So this means to us, and something that we have to be aware of today, that music and worship can be used for good or it can be used for evil. And so we have to decide how we want to use worship and how we want to use instruments. Now we come up here and we have lots of instruments and we love to get them nice and loud and we praise and we're using them, right? We use these instruments so that we can honor God that we serve, and we can also see that these same instruments can be used to worship false gods. And so I'm not going to stand up here and tell you what you can or you can't listen to. You can decide that. But I need you to be aware that there are forms of music out there that can be used to worship false gods, that can be used for evil, to turn you away from our belief system. And you have to be careful. Hey, what am I going to put into my brain and into my ears? Now, we can sit here and we can say things like, well, I can listen to anything I want and it will never affect me. You're wrong. Because the song that you absolutely despise, you know every word of, right? I don't ever want to hear it, but I know all of it. Things like that stick in our brain. What do you open your brain up to? So all the people, it says, fell in obedience to the wrong king. All people. Now in verse 8, therefore at a certain time, the Shadrach came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. They're saying it again. Hey, will your kingdom last forever? I mean, what else would you say? I hope that you end quickly. You know what I mean? They're like, I hope it reigns forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound, here we go again, of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the burning fiery furnace. And there are certain Jews. Now that's really important to pay attention to. There are certain Jews. That means that there were other Jews that came up that did bow, that did compromise, that didn't take a stand. That takes us all the way back to chapter 1, where Daniel decided he wasn't going to defile himself. That means other people sat there and ate the choice foods with me because I would have eaten it. You know what I mean? Like there's some that are that aren't. And he's saying there's certain Jews who you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image you set up. Now this group of people, basically it says they maliciously attack the certain Jews. Why are they doing that? Because these are people that are Babylonian. They are people that have been in this nation. They were part of developing the empire and running things. And now all of a sudden, Daniel comes in, he interprets one dream, and all of a sudden these Jews are elevated to levels above us who are the true people. You see the jealousy that's happening there? Nebuchadnezzar has moved them to places that they don't feel that they should. So now I have these Jewish boys that are from a different nation telling me what to do. And let me just tell you, that's perfect human nature. That's us to a T, that we don't want certain people telling us what to do or how to do. And so they come up with this plan and they use 3 different types of attack to do it. The first thing that they bring up is their nationality, right? The racial difference between a true Babylonian and a Jew. These certain Jews, not just these certain people, not just some other people, but these certain Jews. They made sure to label them as not true Babylonians. Now, they also point out to the king that they're the ones that you appointed. See, you did this. They're the ones that you chose. And the ones that you chose are the ones that are rebelling. And so this is your fault. They're putting it back on the king. And there's nothing worse than someone that you chose doing something wrong. I equate this to, has anybody ever given a recommendation to somebody for a job? They're like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you just give me a really good recommendation? And especially in the company that you work for, can you give me a job? And then you do that, and then they're the worst employee ever. And the boss comes to you and says, hey, you're the one that recommended them, and you're embarrassed, right? And you're like, oh my gosh. And then you feel like you have to babysit this person forever. That's what's happening in this situation. Hey, you promoted them. The ones that you chose to elevate to these positions are the ones that are disobeying and not doing what you want them to do. Then the last thing is they make it a religious issue, because for a long time in history, the biggest problem with Christianity is not that they worship God, it's because they won't worship the other gods. And this even goes through Rome when Nero was the king. The reason why they were so mad and the Jews were so hated was not because they believed in Jesus Christ. It was because they wouldn't accept all the other gods that the Romans believed in. The biggest argument was not, hey, don't believe in Jesus, but just believe with every other person that Jesus is just one of the gods. And so that's the example they're making here. They're going like, hey, they only want to believe in this one. They're trying to say this one's better than the rest of the ones that we believe in. And that's an issue because, King, you don't just believe in one, you believe in many. And they only want to worship the one true King. Hopefully, you only want to worship the one true King. Verse 13, then Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men in before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar answered to them, is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready to hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into the burning fiery furnace. And who is the God? Notice it's a lowercase g. Who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Now, what's interesting and what we have to understand is in the previous verse, when the music sounded, it said all people bowed down and worship. It never said all people but three. So what we have to understand from this text is that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were probably not up front standing. Wherever they were, it was where the person could not see because all people bowed. But what also makes that interesting is then these guys, when we talk about maliciously attacked them, probably knew something about them already. They already knew that they weren't compromising, that they weren't going to bow down, that they were only going to worship their one and true God. And so they went to seek out information to make sure that they stood when the music happened. And when that happened, now I'm going to go pass that on. They probably weren't in a place where everybody could see that they were disobeying the king, but they went to find out and make sure they took that discovery to the king. What's also interesting about this is the question that the king gives, because he actually gives them an opportunity here to defend themselves, which is pretty gracious for this type of king. But what we have to see is in that translation of that word, is it true? He's not saying, is this right or is this wrong? What he's saying is, did you mean to do this? Because that's the actual translation of that passage is, did you mean to not bow down? And so what he's asking is, did you do this on purpose? Or did you just were you in a building where it was real soundproof and you didn't hear the music playing? Did you intend to disobey me? Or is this just a big misunderstanding and these guys just got some stuff confused? Or did you not hear the decree and you didn't know that you were supposed to do that and you were walking around going why is everybody bowing down? What's happening? Explain to me if this is purposeful or is this an accident? Now, this is important because the two are very, very different. And what he's saying is, out there things could happen, but right here in front of me now is you have to let me know. See, in Christianity, we get to find ourselves in some safe places. Sunday morning here in this worship place is a safe place. You're among just believers. And so if I was to stand here and say, if you believe in Jesus Christ and he's your Lord and Savior, you need to stand up. All of us would jump out of that chair. Yeah, I believe in him. But I remember a time where a student brought a gun to a school in Columbine and put a gun to a young girl's head and said, hey, you better say that your God is not real or I'm going to shoot you in the head and you are going to die. And that little girl said, no, I won't do that. And he took her life. That's a different situation. That is not a safe place. Now what's happening is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego maybe were in a room just by themselves and they heard the music and cool, yeah, you bowing? No, I'm not bowing. You bowing? No, cool, we're not bowing. But it's just the three of them. But now in front of the king, The king that is very violent, the king that loves torture, the king that has already made the decree, you're going in the furnace, says, hey, in front of me, are you ready to bow? Now, standing up in that situation is a whole nother story, because there is no second chance, there is no debate, there is no hiding. And when we don't have the possibility to hide, that's when true faith comes out. That's when true Christianity comes out. And so he's basically saying, hey, something may have happened over there, but right in front of me, just show me that you're in line with me. Show me that you're going to bow down to this, because if you don't, then you're going into the fiery furnace. I'll give you another chance, but if you don't do what I asked, you're going in. Now, this also puts a challenge, not just on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but he also challenges the God of all gods, because he actually makes a statement, what God can save you? He's basically elevating himself, saying, when I decide somebody's going to die, what God can stop that from happening? Because what I say around here goes. And if I say somebody's going to die, somebody is going to die. And there is no God anywhere that can save you. So now, not only am I challenging your faith, but I'm challenging the power of your God, the God that interpreted my dream. Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this manner. If this is to be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And he will deliver us out of what? Your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship your golden image that you have set up. So now we're in the very, very unique place. And it's easy to read that and to think, oh man, they're giving it to the king. You know, they're showing it and they're throwing it back in his face, and they're just being bold and insulting him. And you push me, I'm going to push you. And I'm telling you, that's not true at all. They're not having that kind of attitude at all. It's in our translation that it seems that way. What's really happening is they understand that this is still the king. And even if they don't get killed, they're still serving under this God. And I want to make sure it's very clear that God never, ever gives us Christians the openness to be rude or dishonoring or disrespectful to anybody he has placed over us. Why? Because if he placed them over us, we're to respect and honor them because he's placed them. So they were actually being very honoring and respectful when standing before the king and standing for their faith. What does this mean to us? You can stand for your faith without disrespecting others. You don't have to be rude when you stand for your faith. You don't have to be rude when somebody disagrees with you. You don't have to dishonor them. You don't have to do any of that. It is possible for us to be Christians, to stand for what we believe in, and also respect others that disagree with us. You don't have to go into fights. You don't have to be ugly. Come on, we don't have to go on social media and accuse people and put accusations. We don't have to do those things. No, we can stand for our faith in love. Why? Because Christ loves everyone. He calls us to love everyone, no matter if they agree or disagree with us. And so what they're saying in this moment, when they're saying, we don't have to defend ourselves to you, what they're saying is we don't have to defend ourselves for what we've done because we feel no guilt, right? I don't have to tell you why we did this because I've done nothing wrong. And that's in a respectful way. And what they're trying to say is because we're in the will of God, because we're honoring God, there's no guilt inside of us. A lot of times we will have situations in our life, and I know that sometimes it's with family members, sometimes it's coworkers, sometimes it's different people, where when we take a stand, sometimes we're like, oh, I don't really want to say this or do this because it might hurt them, or it might do this, or it might do that. And what I'm trying to tell you is what they're saying is if I do it in the right way, if I honor God and I stand for what I believe in the right way, then inside of me, I won't feel guilt for doing it. I won't feel bad or I won't feel sad that I stood for God. No, there'll be a peace inside of me because I've done nothing wrong. I didn't disrespect you. I wasn't mean or rude or sarcastic to you, but I didn't compromise my faith either. And if that affected you, I'm really sorry it affected you, but I feel no guilt inside. I'm at peace with doing that. when you are in the will of God, you're not going to feel guilty about being in the will of God. Does that make sense to y'all? And so that's what they're saying. They're saying, hey, we don't have anything to explain because we feel no guilt for what we've done. We stood for the one and true God because he says there are to be no other gods before me, and I don't feel guilty about that. So we have a leg to stand on in this world. This declaration that they're about to make is huge, and it's actually in response to what the king says. And they tell him, hey, just so you're aware that there is a God whom we serve that is able. Now, that's very important because if you're wondering who this God is, his name is Jesus Christ. And he is very, very much able. And if you're thinking like, well, how do you know he's able to do these things? How do you know he's able to save us? How do you know he's able to help my circumstances? Well, because the Bible says so. And I just want to read you 3 quick scriptures. Romans 6:25 says this, now to him who is able to strengthen you according to my gospel and to the preaching of Jesus Christ, according to the revelation of the mystery that was kept secret for long ages. Ephesians 3:20, now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all that we ask or think, according to the power of the work within us. Jude 24, now to him who is able to keep you from stumbling into the present blameless before the presence of the glory of the great joy. What I'm telling you is I serve a God and he is able to do things. Do you serve an able God this morning? I mean, do you really believe that he is able to save you from the circumstances? Man, my God is able this morning. I don't serve just a random God. I serve the God. And he is able to save me from anything. And they knew with all of their heart, I mean, they believed it. They weren't just standing, I mean, with all of their heart, they're talking to this king that they know is probably going to put him to the death. And with all their heart, they're saying, hey, I believe in this God. And not only can he save us from the furnace, he can save us, from you, Nebuchadnezzar. Your boss can save you from the misery, but he can save you from the person that puts you down, from the person that's causing misery. He can save you from anything. And not only if that was just powerful enough for you this morning, it's about to get better. Because not only are they saying, hey, I know that my God is able, I know that he can do these things, but I'm going to follow that up with, even if he doesn't, we're still not bowing. I know he can, but if he chooses not to, I'm still not compromising. I'm still not going to worship. I'm still not going to bow. I'm still not going to be weak in my faith. Not only do we have faith, but our faith is not of words. Our faith is not just what we say once a week. Our faith is of action. Because let me tell you, standing in front of that king and saying we ain't going to bow is action. That's me showing my faith through what I do. See, great faith, I mean, that's what we want, right? Great faith isn't wanting our circumstances changed so that we can believe. No, great faith is believing no matter what's going to happen. Oh, I believe in you no matter what's going to happen. I know you can change my circumstances, but even if you don't, I believe anyways. Even if you don't, I'm going to worship anyways. Even if you don't change what's going on, it's okay. It doesn't waver my thought that you can. It's just not in your plan. It's not in your will. It's not in your purpose right now. And there's times as we've developed through this series that we see that God has allowed them to go through some really hard things. Why? Because it wasn't part of his plan to save them. No, they were going to be a witness and a testimony of true faith and their circumstances. You can't have your eyes, right? You can't have your heart and your mind more on circumstances than you do God. No, the circumstances are coming and they're going, but God is constant. He's the same. And my focus is on him. Why? Because I know he can take care of the circumstances. And so I just believe in him and let him take care of the rest. Miracle or not, you're the only God for me. Miracle or not, I believe and I worship you alone. Miracle or not, I'm not bowing. See, Job was this guy, he really was trying to do it right. And God pulled back the veil and allowed the enemy to attack his life in every way possible. And he makes this statement. He says, though he slay me, though he turn up my life, though he comes against me, though all these bad things that happen, I will put my hope in him always. Whew, it's easy on a Sunday morning, but where is it on a Monday? on a Tuesday and a Wednesday and a Thursday, when the boss comes at me, when my life is falling apart, when my kids won't listen, when finances are tough. I mean, where is the faith in those moments? Though I know you can save me, even if you don't, I still believe in you. I still only worship you. These 3 men that knew more than likely they were going to die that day never once demanded God for a miracle. I mean, they never said, God, you better come down here and save us right now. They never demanded anything. All they did was confess about their circumstances and the God that was able to do it. All they confessed was who he was. We know that you could do all this, but we know that also we have a God that is able to save us. But even if he doesn't, I still believe he can. I still believe in who he is. See, true faith leaves the circumstances in God's hands. You don't demand anything. You just say, I know you're able, and here everything is. And what's your will, let it be done. Man, I mean, with sweat pouring down his head, Jesus Christ, not my will, but your will be done. That's the example. Verse 19, then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression on his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the fiery furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. And these men were bound in their cloaks, the tunics, the hats, and the other garments to be thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was so urgent and the furnace was overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. Now, let's just be honest. Some of us, like me, cannot hide our faces. All right, something happens and we're just like, what? We show it everywhere. We can't be that calm, cool person in a meeting. We just look at people like, are you serious right now? And so the king basically heard them defy him. They heard this response, and his face was basically distorted with fury and with anger, that people weren't going like, are you cool with this? No, they knew that he was upset. They knew he couldn't even contain himself. And so his reaction is, hey, fire this thing up 7 times more. Now, I want you to understand that's not a literal moment of this Bible, because nobody was going up with the thermometer and going like, we just need 2 more degrees. What they're saying is as hot as it can get. Take this thing beyond what it should be at. Take it as hot as it can get. And what they're looking for is they're saying, hey, we want to get it to the place where nothing will survive this. Not a piece. There shouldn't be a remnant of what goes into this furnace. And what's also interesting is how they bind them up, because in this accusation, they go, hey, these are the guys you elevated to these positions, right? They made that very clear. Then the Bible also adds in there that when they're bound up in that official attire. Doesn't that speak something to you? Like, why didn't they strip it from them? Why didn't they take it off of them? Like, oh, we'll give this to the next person. We don't want to waste the uniform. No, he's saying, hey, I gave that to you, and I'll take it away from you. Like, I promoted you, and I will unpromote you. But we know that there's only one God that rises up and lowers officials. You see how he's changing his role from, I'm not just a king, I'm not just I am a God also. And I'll decide who goes up and down. They also make sure that through this, that it will burn up quickly and completely. Y'all are going to die fast, and there ain't going to be a ash left of you. It's gone. Now, this furnace, if you've never seen it before, it's a giant bowl-shaped furnace. It's not like a hot box that you would see today that is square and you walk into it. It's a big, giant bowl. And the reason it was so big was that's how they made the statue. They had to melt down all these materials to create these things. And so it's massive. And so you have to understand where they're standing, there's a big ramp that goes up to the top of it where they put the material in. And so they bind up these guys, and these are big muscle guys. And as they're going up, they throw them in the top. But what you have to think about in this situation is that there are 3 different ways that they should have died. There's 3 different things that would have killed a normal person. The first thing is the heat on the way up. Because these big, huge men died from it. So why didn't they? Why didn't they die on the way up in there? These men throw them in, and the fire's so hot it kills them. But it didn't kill Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So then they go in, and I'm telling you, this thing is massive. They're bound. They can't brace anything. They should have hit the bottom and died. The fall itself should have killed them, because they just hit with face first into the bottom of this thing. But that doesn't kill them. And then, of course, then there's the furnace itself that's supposed to, be so hot that nothing can survive. But we see in verse 24, then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered to the king and said, "True, O king." He answered and said, "But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." So just so we can be on the same page, what's happening right now is they throw him in the top of this big, massive furnace, and the king's sitting there on his throne. And what he can see is he can see the bottom of it. And there's an opening in the bottom where they would actually add the fuel, the wood, and everything to make it hot, and they would pull out the ashes. So he didn't walk up to the top and look down in because he would have died too. So he's sitting there and he can actually see in. But what would cause something like that? What would cause a king that just threw these people in this fire that's so hot to go start looking in this window? Well, what we know is that in the Septuagint, which is a Greek translated Bible, all right, they translated it in the Greek language, adds a verse that we don't have in our Bible. And in that verse, this is Daniel 3:24, basically what they say is that in that fire, the men were put in there, the fire burned the ropes that were holding them, and when they found out that they were alive and Jesus Christ was in there with them, that they started worshiping and praising because they weren't dead. Now, when you're sitting down and you just threw 3 men in the fire and all of a sudden you hear worship songs coming from the furnace himself, you go take a peek. And so he's like, what's going on in there? And he looks inside of this thing. And when he looks inside of there, he's astonished because there's not just 3 men, but there's 4, and the 4th one looks like the Son of God's. There's something different about him. He's probably got a little glow to him. His holiness is probably being shown in there. And this causes him to have a little bit of a moment of panic. And so he sees like, oh, there's a mystery. There's an extra person, and it's the Son of God. And I'm not trying to hide the fact that it's Jesus Christ. There's several times in the Old Testament. Jesus Christ is not a New Testament God. No, he was there from the beginning of time. And this is one of the times he appears in the Old Testament to people. And so he appears in this flame with them. And so this shows us in our worst moments, in the hottest moments of life, Jesus isn't up in heaven. No, he's right there in it with you. He is Emmanuel, God with us. He's in the fire with you. But it also tells us whenever life gets hard, you better start worshiping the God that's in the fire with you. When you find out you're still alive, you better start worshiping the God that's with you. You start praising him and going like, I didn't think I was going to make it through this, but with you here in it with me, I have, and you're the reason why. And we start worshiping him. Not only can God deliver us, which they claim, not only can God deliver us from the furnace, but he also can sustain you in the furnace. See, a lot of times our prayer is, God, save us from the furnace. Just take this whole situation away from us. Don't let us get thrown in the furnace. I don't want to go through that. But unfortunately, sometimes God goes, no, for my glory, right? Because we were created for God's glory. For my glory, you got to go in the furnace. But if he sends you into the furnace, he gives you everything that you need to sustain in the fire. See, don't stop praying. Don't stop seeking him, because he's the God that can save you, but he's also the God that can sustain you. And he allows us to have whatever we need to make it through. Verse 26, then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace and declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the God Most High, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire, and the satraps and the prefects and the governors and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw that the fire had no power. I want you to understand, it had no power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their head was not singed. The cloaks were not harmed. There was no smell of fire that came upon him. Now, I don't know about you, but I love to barbecue. And let me just tell you right now, it doesn't take but putting one log on the fire that the hair on your hand and your arm is gone. When that thing gets hot, ain't nothing stopping that hair from burning. It happens quickly. It doesn't take much. And I come out and I got curlies, right? And I'm just like, oh, there went my hair, and I'm bald on my hand. And so I'm just saying, this is as hot as it can get. But then the best part is whenever I barbecue, my wife, she loves the way I smell. Because all that smoke and meat and everything, I don't shower for a week because she just smells me. You know what I mean? I love it. And so I'm like, if this is what you like, I'm fine with it. It's like a cologne. And so they're saying, look, not even a smell was on them. The fire had no power. And I'm just telling you right now, come on, the enemy has no power over you. The life situations have no power over you. When the Son of God is in there with you, it has no power over you. But what's really interesting is when the king goes in and he looks in, he goes, hey, I see 4. One of them looks like the Son of God's, but he only calls out 3. That means I don't want that 4th one coming out here, right? You could go ahead and stay in the fire. The 3 humans come out, the Son of God one that I just talked about, you stay in there because I don't even want to know what you got power over. And he don't even want to call that one over. If I thought I saw God, I would want to draw near to him. No, he's scared to death of him. He doesn't call him out. Maybe because he just said, well, what kind of God is that? Maybe it's because he started elevating himself and he doesn't want to be humbled back down. But when they come out, they check them and they go, you know what? This thing had no power. It didn't burn them. It didn't singe them. They don't smell like it. And at this point, they come to the conclusion that, man, this right here should have destroyed them, but it didn't have any power over them. Why? Because when you're submitted to God in your life, and I mean not kind of submitted, but like when you're truly submitted to God, there is nothing that equals the power of God. And his power just transfers over our situations, and there's nothing that can touch you. Satan himself had to go to God and say, hey, you have to pull back the veil so that I can touch Job. Man, the power of God can put a curtain all around you where the enemy himself can't even touch you. That's what I want for my life. That's what I want around me all the time. That's what I want over my son and my family and over this church and all of you. I want the veil of God's protection over you where nothing can touch you, because he is bigger and better than anything of this world. Verse 28, we're almost there. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel to deliver his servants, who trusted in him. And they set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serving and worshiping a God except their own God. There's a verse that sounds very similar to that. It's in Romans, and it says, worship is a living sacrifice unto God. Where I trust God and I live my life in a way where I don't bow, I don't change, but I live my life as a living sacrifice unto him. See, once again, Nebuchadnezzar claims and he declares that God is a God of gods. He's not saying the only one, but he's saying, hey, I understand that he is of God. But he does understand the key to the salvation of them in the furnace. And he says, it's because you trusted. It's because you trusted that you were saved from what I put you in. And in the Bible, that word trust and faith and belief all share the same root meaning, which it breaks down to the transfer of faith from me to God. I stop trusting in who I am and what I can do and what I'm capable of, and I transfer that to God. And I go, you know what? It's you and what you're capable of. That's what that word really means. I've transferred the belief of faith to you. I believe more in you than I believe in myself. That's when I know I trust God. I believe in you more than I believe in money or finances. I believe in you more than I believe in my job or my title. I believe in who you are. See, in verse 15, the king makes a bold statement and says, what God can save you? He's asking a question, what God can save you? But I want you to listen to verse 29. Therefore I decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their house be laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the province of Babylon. See, in verse 15, he didn't think that there could be anybody. But in verse 29, he knows exactly who that God is. See, our faith to stand shows people who our God is. But if we crumble, then how are they going to know? How can they see? How can they understand? But most of all, the best part of that story is a group of people came in to destroy them because they were elevated. And they go, I don't want to be under these people. I want to tear them down so that I can be in charge. And by the end of the story, they got elevated even more. Tell me who's in charge of rising and lowering the people in charge. There's only one. His name is Jesus Christ, and he is the King of all kings. Come on, stand with me. This. Teachers going back to school. It's stressful. It's hard. But on top of that, there's just normal life happening. And everybody has normal life happening, even if you don't have kids going back to school. Everybody just has things going on. But let me tell you, we come into this place week after week after week. And I want to make sure you understand something. Fear, anxiety, depression, anxiousness, all of that has no power over you unless you give it to it. And so all we have to do is come into this place and we open up the altar. Maybe that's not for you, but that's okay. But get before the King of Kings and just confess something very simple. I know you're the one who can. But even if you don't, I know that you still are the King of Kings. And you will sustain me through whatever I have to go through. And you get to walk through that fire, and it can't touch you. It won't put a smell on you. It won't even burn your hair. Why? Because I transfer my trust into my God and not into who I am. But that only happens if we're totally submitted to Him. And a good way to submit yourself is to get down on your knees in submission to the one who is the one and only true God. I love my God, and I hope you love your God too. And I know that it takes something inside of us to go, oh man, I got to walk up in front of people and kneel down. They're going to think I have problems, and they're going to think this and that. And I'm going, that's what standing for is about. At least there's not a king here saying, I'm going to kill you. This is supposed to be the safe place. And if in the safe place I can't submit myself before my king, how in the world can I ever believe that I'll do it outside of this place? Here is the test. The test is I'm submitted to my Lord and Savior because I know He is the one that can save me from anything. And I want that hedge of protection over my heart. Let's pray. Lord, we just thank you so much for everything that you do. Man, you're so good because not only can you save us, but you can also sustain us. And we thank you that you have given us this word and this Bible so that we can learn and understand and give wisdom of what you do and how you do it. And what we've learned today is that you are the one and true God, and that you are the God that is able. And so if it's your will, Lord, I just pray that you remove any hard circumstance from anybody in this place. I ask that you just remove it so they don't have to go through it. But if it is your will that we go into the furnace, Lord, I just pray that you be in there with us, standing side by side, sustaining us through whatever we have to endure. But most of all, God, I know that we will worship your name because you are worthy of praise. And so we just believe that the enemy has no power over us and nothing can touch us because you are more powerful, because you overcame the world itself. And it's in your name that we pray. Amen and amen.